billionaire cried when he saw his ex-wife cleaning his office. The billionaire everyone envied broke down in tears the moment he saw who was holding the mop in his office. Because 5 years ago, she was his wife, and now she was his cleaner. The rain hammered against the glass tower of Sterling Enterprises, painting streaks down the skyline like grief refusing to dry. Daniel Sterling, billionaire CEO, walked in with his usual precision. Flawless suit, unreadable eyes, the world at his feet. To the world, he was success carved in human form. But to himself, he was a ghost wearing expensive armor. He'd built an empire on control, logic, and silence, especially the silence about her. Clara Monroe Sterling, the only woman who had ever truly seen him, the same woman he drove away with a lie he refused to believe wasn't true. 5 years since the divorce. 5 years since the last time he heard her say his name. He told himself he was fine. That money could replace regret. Until that morning. The elevator doors slid open onto the top floor. His domain. Every inch gleamed. Assistants whispered. Computers hummed. But something was different. A faint sound, the soft rhythm of scrubbing, came from his office. Daniel frowned. Who authorized cleaning before 9? He pushed open the door, and the world stopped. A woman was kneeling beside his desk, wiping the marble floor with slow, careful movements. Her uniform was plain, her posture small. But when she lifted her head, the air left his lungs. It was Clara. Her hair was shorter now, her hands rougher. But her eyes, those eyes, it still carried the same quiet fire he used to fall asleep beside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of the rain outside filled the silence. Clara broke it first. "Sorry, sir," she said softly, rising to her feet. "I didn't realize anyone was in yet." "Sir," the words stabbed through him like a blade. "Clara?" His voice cracked against the weight of her name. "What are you doing here?" Her face stayed calm, professional. "Cleaning. It's my shift." He blinked as if his brain couldn't process it. "Cleaning? You work here?" She nodded once without flinching. "Just started this week." Daniel took a step forward, disbelief turning into shame. "You're cleaning offices now?" Her tone didn't change. "Everyone's got bills, Mr. Sterling." Mr. Sterling. She didn't even call him Daniel. He felt something twist deep in his chest, the same place that used to ache when she laughed. The silence stretched, the kind that holds everything you wish you could undo. His assistant appeared in the doorway, startled. "Oh, I didn't realize someone was in here, sir." Daniel turned sharply. "Who approved her for this floor?" Clara's expression hardened. Don't make a scene. I'm not your problem anymore." Her words hit harder than any slap could have. He wanted to ask, "Why here? Why now? What happened to you?" But his pride wrapped itself around his throat. "Then quit," he said coldly. "I'll have you reassigned." "You don't belong here." She let out a quiet, almost tired laugh. "You're right. I didn't belong then either." And before he could speak again, she placed her cleaning rag in the bucket and walked out, leaving muddy footprints that looked far too much like memories. Daniel stood there still as the elevator doors closed behind her. Then something inside him cracked. He sank into his chair, staring at the spot where she'd been. For 5 years, he'd told himself losing her was necessary, that love made him weak. But in that single brutal minute, he realized the truth. He hadn't just lost her, he'd lost himself. His reflection in the glass looked back like a stranger, the billionaire, the genius, the success story. But behind his eyes, a broken man who'd built an empire out of guilt. They say time heals everything, but sometimes time doesn't heal. It hides, and fate waits for the perfect moment to pull the wound open again. Because what Daniel didn't know was that Clara hadn't come back for forgiveness. She hadn't come back for money or closure. She came back for the truth. And when he found out what that truth was, the man who thought he couldn't break would. Before we continue, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. Because what Clara reveals next will change everything Daniel thought he knew about her and about himself. The next morning, Daniel sat alone in his office. The city outside glittered like nothing had changed, but inside him, everything had. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Clara, standing in that same office, wearing that faded uniform, her voice calm, her eyes distant. She'd spoken to him like he was a stranger, and maybe he was. He'd spent 5 years building skyscrapers and swallowing guilt. 5 years telling himself their divorce was the right thing, that ending it protected her. But the truth? He'd ended it because someone had made him. It had started with whispers in the boardroom. Rumors that Clara had leaked confidential data during a major merger. The evidence looked undeniable. Transactions, messages, even a signed statement he couldn't believe she'd written. But when he confronted her, she said one thing. "Daniel, please, you have to trust me." And he didn't. He let pride make the decision love should have made. He threw her out of the life they built, and she disappeared until yesterday. Now, sitting at his desk, he opened his laptop and searched the building's maintenance records. It took 2 calls and 1 favor, but he found it. Clara Monroe, night shift, subcontracted through Clean Pro Services, assigned to floors 40 to 50 of Sterling Enterprises. He stared at the screen. 5 years apart, and somehow the universe brought her right back to him. But why? Was it coincidence or fate, dragging his past into the light, one quiet mop stroke at a time? By noon, he couldn't take it anymore. He left his meetings unfinished, his assistant confused, and drove downtown, not to the penthouse or the board meeting, but to the district library. Because if there was one thing Clara always said, it was that truth leaves paper trails. And she'd been right. Buried in old news archives, he found something. A single mention of her name. A lawsuit, 3 years old, filed quietly, settled quickly. The defendant, Sterling Enterprises. The claimant, Clara Monroe Sterling. He froze. He had no idea. The details were sealed. Gag order, non-disclosure, private settlement. But one line wasn't redacted. Claimant alleges wrongful termination, coercion, and defamation of character. Defamation? She'd been fired. Not divorced first, but fired. And the evidence against her, the one he'd believed, was planted by his own company. A chill ran through him. Someone inside Sterling Enterprises had set her up, and he'd been too blind to see it. That night he went back to the office. The halls were quiet, cleaners working silently under the hum of fluorescent lights. And there she was again, Clara kneeling by the glass wall, her reflection ghostly in the floor's shine. He stood in the doorway, unsure if he had the right to speak. "Clara." She didn't turn. "I already told your assistant I'm not leaving." "That's not why I'm here." He took a slow step closer. "I found the lawsuit." The cloth in her hand stilled. He continued, voice low, careful. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you fight back?" She finally looked at him, eyes tired, guarded. "Fight who, Daniel? The company with your name on it? The lawyers you paid?" He flinched. She wasn't yelling, but every word hit harder than a scream. "You believed them," she said softly. "You believed I'd betray you. And once you did, there was nothing left to fight for." He swallowed hard. "I thought I was protecting the business." She laughed on a small, bitter. "And I thought marriage was supposed to protect the truth." He wanted to explain, to say that he'd tried to find her, that he'd sent people, that the guilt never stopped. But she'd already turned back to cleaning, and somehow that hurt most of all. He crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Tell me who did it, please." Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but anger long buried. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said. "I just need to work, Daniel." "That's it," he shook his head. "No, someone destroyed you. They used me to do it." She looked up, finally truly looked at him. "Then live with that." He sat there in silence as she stood and walked out again, her footsteps fading into the hall. But this time, he didn't stay behind. He followed. The next day, Clara didn't show up for her shift. The cleaning service said she'd requested a transfer out of the city, No forwarding address, no contact info. Panic gripped him. He checked everywhere, hospitals, records, even reached out to the lawyer who'd handled the old case. But the file was empty, wiped. Someone didn't just ruin her career, they erased her. Days turned into weeks, until one morning, a plain envelope arrived on his desk. No return address. Inside, a photograph. It was a younger Clara, standing in front of a small community shelter. On the back, a single handwritten note. If you want to understand, start where I began. No signature, but the handwriting was hers. He stared at the address beneath, Hollow Creek Shelter, a place she used to volunteer before their marriage. His gut told him this wasn't nostalgia. This was a breadcrumb. That evening, Daniel drove to Hollow Creek. The shelter was barely standing. Peeling paint, flickering lights, a handful of volunteers serving soup. And then he saw her. Not in uniform this time. In a simple sweater, her hair tied back, her sleeves rolled up. Clara. She was laughing softly with a group of children, helping them stack donated books into a crate. Her smile, the one he thought he'd lost forever, flickered across her face like sunlight through broken clouds. And that's when it hit him. She wasn't cleaning floors because she'd fallen. She was cleaning because she'd rebuilt herself from nothing. She wasn't the woman who needed saving. She was the woman who saved others. Quietly, fiercely, without applause. Daniel stepped closer, the weight in his chest turning from guilt to awe. He'd spent years building towers. She'd spent years building people. And maybe that's why fate brought her back. Not to punish him, but to remind him what love without power looks like. As he watched her hand a bowl of soup to a little girl, something inside him broke and healed at the same time. He realized that maybe love isn't about what you own, but who you've become. And for the first time since she left, Daniel whispered a promise he intended to keep. I'll earn the right to know you again. But fate wasn't done with them yet, because what Daniel didn't know was that the truth behind Clara's disappearance and the person who destroyed their marriage was much closer than he imagined. Much closer and still watching. If your ex returned to your life not for love, but for closure, would you fight for them or finally let them go? Daniel didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The image of Clara at the shelter haunted him. Her quiet smile, the warmth in her voice, the peace she carried like armor. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for him, but maybe it was the one he'd needed after he destroyed the old one. Still, one question burned in his mind like fire. Who had done this to them? Who forged the evidence? Who planted the lies? And why erase Clara completely, even after she was gone? He had resources, power, connections. But this time, he wasn't using them to win. He was using them to find the truth. By morning, he was in his office again, door locked, blinds drawn, laptop open to encrypted files no one else could access, old emails, deleted reports, employee records, everything the company thought it had buried. And then, he found it. An old transaction dated 2 weeks before their divorce, $500,000 wired from the company's private account to a consulting firm. The name of the recipient froze his blood, Vanessa Cole, his head of legal, his most trusted advisor, and Clara's closest friend. He leaned back in disbelief. Vanessa, the woman who convinced him Clara had leaked information, the same woman who told him, if you want to protect your reputation, let her go quietly. She had been behind everything, the forged messages, the false evidence, the smear campaign that painted Clara as unstable. It all pointed back to her. But the question was why? And when he opened Vanessa's personnel file, the answer hit him like a brick to the chest. She'd positioned herself to seize control, manipulating board votes and proxy shares. 6 months after the divorce, forcing Daniel into a minority role he never fully accepted. By ruining Clara and destroying his marriage, she'd gained full control over his life's work. It wasn't personal, it was power. He closed his eyes, his heart pounding with equal parts rage and guilt. He'd destroyed the woman he loved, and let a traitor turn his empire into her throne. Now, Clara was the one cleaning floors, and Vanessa was the one sitting in his chair, but not for long. The next day, Daniel visited the shelter again. Clara looked surprised but calm, her guard still up. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," he replied, "but there's something you need to see." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Proof. Vanessa forged everything. She destroyed us so she could control my company." Clara didn't reach for it. She just stared at him, eyes cold, unreadable. "And what now, Daniel?" "You expose her, get your empire back, and what? Feel better?" His voice broke. "No. I just want you to know it wasn't you. You didn't betray me." Clara looked down, her fingers tightening around the chair's edge. Tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. "I know that," she whispered. "I just stopped waiting for you to figure it out." The silence that followed was suffocating. She finally looked up at him, tired, sad, but stronger than ever. "You can't fix this by punishing her. You can only fix it by owning what you let happen." Her words sank deep, and for the first time Daniel realized something painful. His real failure wasn't that he believed Vanessa. It was that he stopped believing Clara. That night he made a decision. He wouldn't just clear Clara's name. He'd destroy the system that made her suffer. He leaked the evidence. Every document, every forged message, every illegal transaction, straight to the press. Within hours, the story exploded. Sterling Enterprises under investigation. Corporate sabotage scandal. Billionaire betrayed from within. Vanessa's name was everywhere, and Daniel, once untouchable, became the man who brought his own empire to its knees just to tell the truth. By dawn, his phone rang nonstop. Investors panicking, lawyers threatening, reporters begging for statements. But he ignored them all. He was already on his way to the shelter. He found Clara outside, standing beneath the morning sun, her hair glowing gold in the light. He handed her a newspaper. Her face softened as she read the headline. Then she looked at him, searching his eyes for the man she once loved. "You did it," she said quietly. "No," he said. "We did. You never gave up on what was right, even when I did." For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them felt suspended. Two people standing in the wreckage of everything they'd lost, wondering if love could survive the truth. Finally, Clara sighed. "So what happens now?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Now I start over, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, just as a man trying to be worthy of the woman he broke." She looked at him, the same man who once had everything, now stripped of all but honesty. "You think forgiveness is that easy?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No, but I'm willing to earn it one truth at a time." Weeks passed. Vanessa was arrested for corporate fraud. The empire Daniel built was dismantled and rebuilt under new ownership. And somewhere in that chaos, Daniel found peace. Not in power, but in humility. He volunteered at the shelter every week, not because Clara asked him to, but because it was the first place he'd ever seen real strength. At first, she barely spoke to him. Then she started asking for help stacking boxes. Then came coffee. Then small smiles. It wasn't love yet, but it was healing. One evening, while closing up, Clara found Daniel sitting alone in the empty hall, staring at an old donation box. She sat beside him quietly. No words, just silence. The kind that feels safe again. He looked at her, his voice low. "I used to think money made me powerful. But you taught me what real power is." She raised a brow. "And what's that?" He smiled faintly. "Grace. Forgiveness. Starting over without needing to win." For the first time in years, Clara smiled back. A small, fragile thing that somehow felt like a sunrise. As the lights dimmed, she said softly, "You know, I never stopped hoping you'd see me again. Not the way you used to, but the way I really am." Daniel met her gaze, emotion trembling in his voice. "I do now, and I'll never look away again." Sometimes love isn't about going back. It's about coming clean. Sometimes the person you lost doesn't need your apology. They need your change. And sometimes redemption isn't a grand gesture. It's a quiet act of courage that says, I'm still here. I still care. Weeks later, Daniel sold his remaining minority stake, the last piece of the empire he'd clung to, and donated every cent to the shelter anonymously. And for the first time, he felt free. Clara never needed his money. She just needed him to understand why she walked away. And now, he finally did. 3 years later, the Sterling Hope Foundation for Second Chances was built inside. Volunteers bustle, children laugh, and at the center of it all, Daniel and Clara. No longer boss and wife, no longer strangers or ghosts, just partners, rebuilding quietly, beautifully together. They called her a maid. They called him heartless. But in the end, they became proof that love, when it's real, doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to find its way home. Months passed. The city healed, but Daniel's guilt never really left him. Every newspaper headline, every online interview about the Sterling scandal reminded him of what he'd cost the one woman who had ever truly loved him. But slowly, something changed. The shelter grew. Donations poured in. People stopped whispering Clara's name with pity and started saying it with respect. And Daniel, the billionaire who once ruled boardrooms, learned how to sweep floors, serve meals, and listen. For the first time in his life, he was present. One evening, the shelter hosted a charity dinner. Small, intimate, full of laughter. Clara was radiant that night, not in diamonds or silk, but in purpose. Daniel watched from the back of the room, unseen, his chest tight with something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. When she took the microphone to thank the donors, her voice trembled slightly. She said, "This place isn't about saving others. It's about being saved, over and over again, by kindness, by grace, by the people who refuse to give up on us." Her eyes met Daniel's across the room, just for a second, and in that second, he saw something he thought was gone forever. Forgiveness. After the guests left, Daniel helped stack chairs, pretending not to notice how his hands shook every time she walked past. When the last light went off, she turned to him. "You didn't have to stay and clean." He smiled softly. "Old habits die hard, remember?" For the first time, she laughed. A real laugh, one that reached her eyes. It broke something inside him, and healed something too. They stood there, surrounded by the faint hum of silence, years of pain and longing between them. "Clara," he said finally, voice raw, "if I could undo everything—" She stopped him with a shake of her head. "You can't." He swallowed hard. "I know, but I can try to make what's next better." Her expression softened. "And what does better look like to you?" He hesitated, eyes glistening. "You. Just you being okay. Even if that means it's without me." That silence again, the kind that feels like truth. She looked at him, really looked at him. The arrogance was gone. The walls were gone. All that was left was a man stripped of ego, standing in the wreckage of his mistakes, asking quietly to be forgiven. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you can't fix the past, but maybe you can stop punishing yourself for it." He met her eyes. "Only if you stop punishing me too." The room felt smaller, warmer, like maybe, just maybe, love wasn't gone after all. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. For a heartbeat, they stood that way, inches apart, the air between them alive with everything unsaid. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered. "I don't know if I deserve to be," he said honestly. Their eyes locked. Pain, history, longing, forgiveness, all tangled into one impossible emotion. And then, she leaned in, just slightly. "Then don't make promises," she said. "Just keep showing up." Weeks passed, and Daniel did just that. Every morning he showed up at the shelter before sunrise. He helped organize shipments, fix leaky pipes, teach job workshops. Not once did he talk about love. Not once did he ask for a second chance. He just showed up. And little by little, Clara began to trust again. Not because of what he said, but because of what he did. One afternoon, a rainstorm hit the city. Sudden, heavy, relentless. Clara rushed to close the windows, laughing as water splashed onto her face. Daniel appeared beside her, equally drenched, holding a stack of towels. "You always find the storm funny," he said. She smiled. "It reminds me that some things are out of our control. And yet," he said quietly, "you still face them." Their eyes met, rain dripping from their hair, and something inside them both gave way. Not in words, but in surrender. It wasn't a kiss like in the movies. It was slower, hesitant, full of pain and healing. A kiss that said, "I'm sorry, I still love you, and I finally understand." After that day, things didn't turn perfect, but they turned real. They rebuilt, not as Billionaire and Maid, not as broken lovers, but as equals. The shelter grew into a full foundation, reaching thousands. Daniel found meaning not in money, but in service. And Clara found peace not in forgetting the past, but in rewriting it, together. Love isn't about never falling apart. It's about finding someone who will help you rebuild when you do. Daniel and Clara's story wasn't about loss. It was about rediscovery. Because sometimes, the person you hurt most is the one who ends up saving you. Years later, the skyline had changed, but Daniel and Clara had changed more. The Sterling Hope Foundation now stretched across cities, helping thousands rebuild their lives. Reporters called it the empire born from ashes, but to Daniel it was something simpler, proof that love could survive truth. On their anniversary, he arrived early to the foundation gala. The hall glittered with lights and laughter, but his eyes searched only for her. Clara appeared at the top of the staircase, elegant, calm, no trace of the maid or the millionaire's wife, just the woman who taught him what wealth really meant. When she reached him, he whispered, "You still take my breath away." She smiled. "That's because you finally learned how to breathe." They laughed softly, two souls who had walked through fire and come out clean. During his speech, Daniel didn't talk about success or second chances. He said, "The richest man in the room isn't the one with the highest net worth. It's the one who's finally earned forgiveness, starting with his own." Applause filled the hall, but his gaze stayed on Clara. She didn't clap. She simply smiled, and that was enough. Later that night, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The wind carried faint music from below, the hum of life continuing, proof that stories could end beautifully without being perfect. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. He thought for a long time. "Only that it took losing you to find myself." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then maybe we both found what we were meant to." They said the billionaire cried when he saw his ex-wife cleaning his office. What they didn't see was how that moment cleaned his heart. If life handed you a second chance with someone you lost, would you take it or leave the past buried? Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. These stories take hours to write, edit, and bring to life, and your support keeps us going. Thank you for being part of this journey.